A unique study on human interaction has been conducted at the city's covered sports stadium. Researchers mounted cameras to the stadium roof to monitor social behaviour of participants below. And Professor Jamin Halberstadt of the University of Otago Psychology Department is here to tell us more. Good evening.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, what were you looking at with this project?
I would describe this as a proof of concept study, where the concept was maybe to try to turn our great large stadium into the world's largest social science laboratory. So, I mean, I'm a social psychologist by training, and social psychologists like to study human behavior, but there's always a trade-off, and the trade-off is between experimental control and real life. So, you know, if you want to make some conclusions about why people behave the way they do, you have to somehow control the environment that they're in. And that's not that easy to do when you're just observing them in real life. But as soon as you bring them into the laboratory, then you sort of lose the real life aspect, and people criticize that and say it doesn't really mimic what people do in real life. So the stadium potentially offers the best of both of these worlds, because it's a huge place where people can interact more or less naturally, but yet we can still have some control over the environment that they're in.
Can you give us a summary of the findings?
Yes, well, there are a lot, because we worked with Animation Research Limited, who did the video on this. We put a camera in the very top of the stadium. People weren't aware that they were aware they were being filmed, but they weren't aware that the camera was up above, and we were monitoring their movements. And we measured, we took measurements of where they were in the stadium 30 times per second for an entire hour for about 150 people. So there's a ton of data. One of the findings was simply looking at what the size of groups are that people form. It turns out we saw about 200 groups form from we had a large crowd, and we saw them form smaller groups. And the average size was about 6 people. That's already an interesting finding in itself, because people believe that group size depends on context, but no one has really seen what the group size will be if you take that context away. So just all things being equal, people seem to want to get into groups of 6 people. We found that people segregated themselves on the basis of physical attractiveness and gender more than you would expect by chance. We found that women tended to be in the middle of groups more than you would expect. They were closest to the geometric center of groups. We found that people's embeddedness in groups, so how close they were to other people in the group, predicted how much they would cooperate with the group. And in fact, the people who stood more closely to others in their groups tended to be less cooperative later.
Were you surprised by the findings?
I would say no, not necessarily. I mean, you have to be surprised, you have to have an expectation, and since this has never been done before, I didn't have any expectations. I mean, but we did discover a lot of things that I find interesting. I mean, I think the findings on attractiveness are predicted from other research that social psychologists have done. Attractive people tend to be judged as more popular, more competent, more interesting, so it's not that surprising that people would gravitate toward them in a group context like this.
Has there been international interest in your research?
There has. I know you've got the local scoop, but CNN wants to do a piece on it. There was something in Bloomberg on this. Actually, what I think is the most interesting is really the stadium angle myself, but other news outlets seem to be more interested in the fact that attractive women are in the middle of groups. So,
are you planning more research around this?
Yes. Animation Research has agreed to do another study with us. I just need a little bit more funding. We've got there's almost an endless number of ideas that you can experiment with in the stadium context. So it's really just a matter of creativity and funding. Absolutely.
Well, with a bit of worldwide appeal, which will be brought to you by this show and CNN, of course, the funding will roll in, surely. Jamin Halberstadt from the University of Otago, thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.